Hey everybody, welcome back to Salt City Counseling. I recorded this video once and the microphone wasn't on, so the audio was awful. So I'm laughing so that I don't get angry. Before I dive into the meat and potatoes of this video, check out the description below, please, if you have a viewer question you'd like to ask me regarding mental health, parenting, whatever, high conflict, divorce, and custody. My email should be in the description below. You can also check out my other channel if you want videos about personal empowerment and spirituality. Also, there's a link to my new high conflict community on Patreon. This is my online platform to help people get the best tips, tricks, tools, methods, and the best information that I can possibly give to people when it comes to managing high conflict issues. Okay, if you have an ex who's borderline narcissist and trying to co-parent with them is a nightmare, that's where you're going to want to go. That's just the best information I believe that you're going to be able to find on the internet regarding this stuff. Okay. Okay, let's talk about trauma. Let's get into talking about trauma. Now, the therapy world, I feel like, is doing a good job just in terms of moving more so in the direction of trauma-informed care. Okay, and really what that means, right, is we're looking at each individual and how their dysfunction or their issues might have a component of trauma to it. I personally believe that virtually everybody has at least some trauma or another, usually in their childhood. And I believe it can come in a lot of different forms. Trauma can. Obviously, there's those really acute, really nasty incidents. You know, a violent rape, for example, is traumatic. It's very traumatic. You know, going to Vietnam War and having your best friend blow up in front of you is traumatic. But also as a child, being abandoned is traumatic in its own way. Having your joy stolen by your parents. I'm going to do a video on that. Not today, I don't have time, but let's get into the meat and potatoes and talk about trauma. And so I know that it is a very, very big deal for people if they have trauma to seek out a therapy model that a lot of people have heard of called EMDR. I believe it stands for Eye Movement Desensitization Reprogramming or something like that. Reprocessing? I believe it's reprocessing. This is the therapy model du jour. And I kind of talked about this in another video. But there are several problems with EMDR, and that one is that it's a very complex therapy modality that can be re-traumatizing for clients. It can be very, very intense. A lot of ambitious therapists they seem to be more intent on the ambition of becoming an EMDR therapist and market themselves as an EMDR therapist than they are being sensitive or aware or mindful of the trauma threshold that people have. And I've talked to plenty of people that have been re-traumatized by EMDR. And I want therapy to be therapeutic. I want people to leave feeling positive, empowered, a lot more free, like a weight has come off their shoulders. I want them to feel like they can't wait to go back instead of like, oh man, I gotta do EMDR and spend the next 2 days sitting in the corner of my room crying in the dark, right? And a lot of EMDR therapists will say that doesn't happen. Yes, it does. Sorry, actually, it does. It's just one of those things. There are lots of other therapy models: CBT, DBT. There's tons of them. Okay, there's tons of other therapy models, and it's one thing to botch EMDR. It's terrible if you botch EMDR, and it's okay if you kind of botch CBT, right? It's not, EMDR can be super intense. So when it's done poorly or it's done wrong, it can be bad. It can be really bad. And truth be told too, finding a good EMDR therapist that is localized, is affordable or takes your insurance, and doesn't have a wait list, you can get in to see them, is not always realistic. I mean, I had a conversation yesterday where it's like, well, someone's looking for a DBT therapist, and I'm like, well, unfortunately, I hate to tell you, but so are a lot of people. You know, that doesn't mean there's not enough DBT therapists, for example, that meet the demands. Being a therapist is just frankly not a good enough job. You put a lot into it, and the returns are frankly just not worth it to us sometimes. So a lot of people, they'll say, I want a DBT therapist. I'm sure you would benefit from one, but it's just sometimes not always possible. So kind of getting back to the trauma piece, there are different ways to approach trauma. You can always empower yourself. I say this all the time. You do not need permission from a therapist, a psychologist, a doctor. You especially don't need permission from a lawyer. I always have to get my jabs in with the lawyers, man. You do not need permission from a family attorney to do anything, pretty much. That may or may not be true, but I have to get my jabs in. But you don't need anybody's permission to empower yourself. So if you want to empower yourself, here are some of my suggestions. Okay, less aggressive and effective ways to treat trauma. Okay, and my other channel, Wisdom and Brews, will probably have a little bit more content on how to empower yourself in this regard, changing your belief systems. The first thing that you're going to want to do is you are going to want to establish routines of healthiness. Now, I hear a lot of people say all the time, I don't want to do that thing, even if that thing may really empower them. Just because what? It's not fun, it's not enjoyable, because you don't love it. Well, it may empower you. It may teach you some really positive things about yourself. If you're a person that feels small or weak or powerless, you should lift weights, even if you hate lifting weights, because it will make you strong. And when you start to feel strong physically, you will feel strong mentally. That's just the bottom line, man. I guarantee you that is true. So it's like, well, I don't like lifting weights. Well, I may not like lifting weights either, but I like feeling strong and I like being empowered, and that's what I get from it. It's like I don't necessarily like eating Brussels sprouts, but I like the health benefits. I mean, I'm sorry, but that's a childish thing to say. If you know something's good for you, and you don't do it just because you don't like it, like, do you want to be empowered or do you not? I digress. But if you establish a pattern and routines of personal strength and empowerment and coping, like get into the routine of doing a lot of writing, doing a lot of creativity, do something artistically. Meditation is very powerful for improving your brain functioning. I'm convinced that meditation is one of those things that will give you a lot of the similar effects that EMDR will give you without costing you money and without potentially re-traumatizing you. Meditation, okay? And I'll kind of get back to that. One of my favorite approaches to treating trauma is TFCBT, which is trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy. It's a therapy method that is designed specifically to take confusing or troubling events and basically reinterpreting them, putting a new perspective on them, rewriting the story in your brain. Okay, it can be very, very super effective and very, very empowering. And you can read a book on it. You can watch YouTube videos on it. There's probably YouTube videos on it. There's YouTube videos on everything. And it's less likely to cause you to black out for a day and a half because you were re-traumatized. Sorry, it really bugs me when EMDR is done poorly, and it really bugs me when the therapy community goes, "What are you talking about?" Like, look into it. Anyways, I do find that the more seasoned therapists are very dialed into this, where the younger ones are like, "I don't know what you're talking about." That doesn't happen. Yeah, it does. Another therapy tool that I really like, approach, or lifespan integration. Kind of similar stuff where you just sort of reprogramming the mind or inserting different beliefs. I've used this therapy tool that I've loved. It is very, very powerful. If you had told me years ago that it was as powerful as it was, I would have been like, a little bit skeptical, but I've used it with astounding results. The most profound was that one time I did it with a dad and a son, and it was probably the number one most powerful and effective and just flat out amazing therapy session I've ever done, which I feel like is saying a lot because I've done probably thousands of therapy sessions. And really it was about reverting back to this childhood, like I had this dad revert back to his childhood and address the trauma and reparent himself. What did that scared, hurt kid need to hear? What did he need a parent to tell him, do for him? And he was letting it all out. And I'm like, well, guess what? You need to tell that to your son. And then he just like unloaded on his son all this love and compassion, embraced him and acceptance, and they were both sobbing. It was extremely powerful, and it was very positive experience for both of them. You can kind of do this for yourself. You can kind of reparent yourself. Okay. I also very much love some of the spiritual approaches. There's kind of an overlap with positive psychology on addressing trauma. Okay. And to me, it's really about reprogramming beliefs. If you take your belief systems and you can use these spiritual practices to address your trauma and improve your trauma. I want to be really clear about something. When I say spirituality, I'm not referring to religion. To some people, religion is spiritual for them. That's their personal experience, and that's fine. But that's not what I refer to. So if I say spirituality and you're thinking church, it's not what I'm talking about. It's really about the relationship with the self and empowering the self. Okay, meditation, reprogramming the beliefs. I've actually kind of been using lately spiritual techniques such as manifestation and a law of attraction to change core beliefs about myself. Okay, so I got to close this up because I got to get my socks and shoes on and get my butt to work. So thank you for watching. That is some of my thoughts on addressing and treating trauma without the use necessarily of EMDR. There's there's just many ways to do this. There are many roads that lead to Rome. Okay, thanks again for watching. We'll see you next time.